A man in a plain white t-shirt walked into the most exclusive hotel in Chicago and was thrown out by the restaurant manager in front of every guest in the room. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He only looked at the woman who had humiliated him and said, "Tomorrow, you'll know exactly who I am." The next morning, the entire hotel went silent when they learned his true identity. But what truly terrified them was not who he was. It was how he chose to answer her cruelty. The Lancaster Crown stood on the corner of Michigan Avenue like a monument to old money, its limestone facade catching the late afternoon light over downtown Chicago. For more than 40 years, it had welcomed senators' oil heirs and corporate kings through its revolving brass doors, and for just as long, it had quietly turned away anyone who did not look like they belonged. The lobby smelled of cold marble and warm leather. A pianist in the corner played something slow and forgettable. Outside, the October wind moved through the buildings the way it always did in that month, sharp and impatient. Julian Cross stepped through the revolving doors a few minutes before 6 in the evening. He wore a plain white t-shirt, dark jeans, and a pair of black sneakers that had seen better years. No watch, no jewelry. A small leather duffel hung from his shoulder. He moved without hurry the way a man moves through a place he already knows, though no one at the front desk recognized him. He had been gone too long, and the staff who had once known his face had retired or moved on years ago. For the last 11 years, Julian had run Lancaster Holdings from a private office in Atlanta, letting the board handle the day-to-day operations of the hotels his father had built. The complaints had been small at first. A guest letter here, a 2-star review there. Then a pattern began to surface. Working-class travelers seated near the kitchen, quiet refusals at the door dressed up as policy. He had read the reports and felt something cold settle in his chest, because the Lancaster Crown had been his father's first hotel, the one the old man used to call his proudest mistake. Julian had flown in that morning without telling anyone. He wanted to see it himself. The maître d' at the entrance of the hotel's flagship restaurant, the Belmont Room, glanced up from her podium as Julian approached. Her name was Camille Harper, and she had been managing the Belmont for almost 6 years. She was 34 years old, sharp-featured and polished, the kind of woman who wore her uniform like armor. Her hair was pulled back so tightly, it looked painted on. She wore a black dress, a thin gold chain, and an expression that did not soften when she saw who was standing in front of her. "I'd like a table for one," Julian said. Camille's eyes traveled from his sneakers to his t-shirt and back to his face. She did not bother to hide the calculation behind the look. The Belmont Room had a dress code printed on its menus and engraved in smaller letters on a brass plaque by the door, but the dress code was not really the point. The point was the kind of people Camille believed belonged in the Belmont, and the kind she believed did not. She placed both hands flat on the podium. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have a strict dress code. Jackets are required after 5 o'clock. Her voice was warm in the way customer service voices are warm, the warmth of someone trained to sound polite while saying no. "I'd be happy to recommend somewhere more suitable down the street." "I'm a guest of the hotel," Julian said evenly. "I came in from the airport. My bags are upstairs." "Then I'd suggest a change of clothes, sir." The conversation could have ended there. Julian could have turned around, gone up to his suite, put on a jacket, and come back down. He had done it before, in other cities, in other restaurants, when the choice was between his dinner and his dignity. But something kept him standing. He wanted to see how far she would take it. He wanted to know what she did when she thought no one was watching her. "I'll just have a glass of water at the bar," he said quietly. "I won't be long." Camille's smile thinned. Behind him, 2 couples in evening wear had stopped to watch. A gentleman in a navy suit lowered his phone. The pianist in the lobby kept playing, but somehow the room felt smaller. Camille raised her chin slightly, the way she did when she had decided that a problem needed to be made into an example. "Sir, I've asked you politely. The Belmont room is not for walk-in service in casual attire. If you continue to insist, I'll have to call security. Call them. The word landed harder than she expected. For a moment, her composure slipped, and a flush rose along her neck. She lifted the phone from the podium and pressed a button. Front desk. Please send a member of security to the Belmont entrance. We have a guest who needs to be escorted out. Olivia Bennett was the one who took the call. She was 26, 3 months into her job at the Lancaster Crown front desk, and she still believed that hospitality was supposed to mean what the word said. She had grown up in a small town in southern Illinois, the daughter of a school secretary, and a man who fixed appliances for a living. She had paid her way through hospitality school by working night shifts at a diner. She had not yet learned to look past people the way her colleagues had. She still saw them. When she came around the corner with the security officer, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus, the scene at the Belmont entrance had already drawn a small crowd. Camille stood with her arms folded. Julian stood with his hands loose at his sides, his expression unreadable. Olivia felt her stomach tighten. She had seen Camille do this before, twice in 3 months, and both times she had said nothing about it. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to come with me," Marcus said, his tone neutral. Julian did not move. He looked at Camille for a long moment, the way a man looks at someone he is committing to memory. There was no anger in his face, no heat, only a quiet, deliberate attention that made Camille shift her weight without meaning to. He spoke calmly, almost gently. "What's your name?" "Excuse me." "Your name." "Camille Harper. I'm the restaurant manager here." He repeated it once under his breath, as if testing the sound of it. Then he picked up the strap of his duffel and slid it back onto his shoulder. He took 2 steps toward the revolving doors and turned back to face her one last time. "Tomorrow," he said, "you'll know exactly who I am." The line was not loud. He did not deliver it for effect. He said it the way another man might say goodnight. But something in the tone made the gentleman in the navy suit lower his phone again, made the pianist miss a note, made Olivia standing 2 steps behind. Marcus, feel the small hairs on the back of her arms rise. Camille rolled her eyes the moment the revolving door spun behind him. God, what a clown. Marcus said nothing. He turned and walked back toward his post. "Did you see the shoes?" Camille went on half to him and half to no one. "You can always tell. They come in here and think a t-shirt is going to slide. Not on my floor." Olivia opened her mouth and closed it. She had wanted to say something the first time she watched Camille do this in August to an elderly couple from Memphis who had come in to celebrate their 40th anniversary. She had not said anything then. She had told herself she was too new. She had told herself it was not her place. The shame of that silence had not gone away. "Camille," she said carefully. "He said he was a guest. He had a duffel bag. They all say they're guests. What if he was? Then he'll learn to dress like one." Camille turned back to her podium and adjusted the reservation book as if straightening a tie. The matter was closed in her mind. Olivia stood there a moment longer, then walked back to the lobby, the man's last words moving through her head like a bell that had been struck and would not stop ringing. Julian did not go up to his suite that night. He walked out of the hotel, took a black town car around the block twice, and checked into a smaller property he owned 3 blocks east, where the night manager did not know his face either, but at least did not stop him at the door. He sat at the edge of the bed in a corner room on the 14th floor and watched the lights of the city through the window. He thought about his father, who had cleaned floors in a hotel in St. Louis at 17 and bought his first property at 38. He thought about the speech the old man used to give at every staff meeting about how the measure of a hotel was the worst moment in it, not the best. He took out his phone and made 3 calls. The first was to the chief operating officer of Lancaster Holdings, a man named Daniel Pierce, who had worked under Julian's father and who answered on the second ring even at 11 at night. "Daniel, I want a full executive review at the Crown tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Every department head in the ballroom. I'm flying the leadership team in tonight." Tomorrow, Julian, that's not a lot of notice. Tomorrow. The second call was to his head of human resources. The third was to the public relations director, a woman named Rebecca Vale, who had worked for the company for 16 years, and who did not ask any questions when she heard the tone in his voice. By the time Julian set the phone down, the wheels were already turning quietly across 3 states. He did not sleep much. He kept seeing the look on Camille Harper's face, that little flicker of pleasure when she had told him the dress code, and underneath that the question he could not stop asking. How many? How many before him? How many he would never know about? The Lancaster Crown employed 211 people. He wondered how many of them had watched her do it and said nothing. By 7 the next morning, the front desk of the Lancaster Crown was buzzing with a quiet electric anxiety. An internal memo had gone out at 6:15. Lancaster Holdings ownership and senior leadership would be arriving for an unannounced operational review at 9 o'clock sharp. All department heads were required in the grand ballroom. The front desk team had received a separate note. Full uniform, hair pulled back. No exceptions. Olivia read the memo 3 times. She had never been in a room with the company's ownership. She had never even seen a photograph of the man who owned Lancaster Holdings. The company kept his image off the website. He gave no interviews. The staff handbook referred to him only as J. Cross, chairman of the board. At 8:45, a line of black town cars pulled up under the entrance canopy. Doormen opened the doors. Senior executives stepped out one after another. The COO, the CFO, the head of operations, the head of HR. They moved through the lobby in a tight formation, nodding at no one, and disappeared into the grand ballroom on the 2nd floor. Camille arrived at 8:50 in a fresh black dress and a thin string of pearls, the picture of composure. She had heard about the review from the assistant general manager that morning and had spent 45 minutes in front of her bathroom mirror preparing for it. She believed she was good at her job. She believed her numbers spoke for themselves. The Belmont Room had the highest per-cover revenue of any restaurant in the Lancaster portfolio, and she believed that fact was a kind of armor. The last car pulled up at 8:58. The doorman stepped forward. The rear passenger door opened, and a man stepped out into the cold gray light of Michigan Avenue. He was wearing a black wool overcoat over a charcoal suit, a white shirt, and a dark tie. His shoes were polished. His face was the same face that had stood in front of Camille's podium less than 15 hours earlier. Olivia recognized him first. She was standing just inside the revolving doors, holding a stack of welcome folders that she had been told to deliver to the ballroom, and she felt the folders go loose in her hands. She did not drop them. She held very still and watched him cross the marble floor. He walked into the lobby. The doorman bowed slightly. The bellman froze. The front desk manager, a woman named Grace Whitfield, stepped out from behind the counter, smoothed the front of her jacket, and met him in the center of the marble floor. "Welcome back, Mr. Cross," Grace said. Her voice was steady, but it was not the voice of a woman who had been expecting this. "Thank you, Grace." He looked around the lobby slowly. He nodded at the doorman by name. He glanced at the pianist's empty bench. Then his eyes moved to the entrance of the Belmont Room, where Camille Harper had just appeared on her way to the executive meeting, and where she had stopped mid-step, her hand still on the doorframe. Her face went the color of paper. Julian did not speak to her. He did not even acknowledge her presence. He turned and walked toward the staircase that led up to the grand ballroom, and the executive team fell in behind him, and the lobby returned very slowly to the sound of the pianist and the soft rotation of the revolving doors. The meeting in the ballroom lasted 3 hours. By the time it ended, half the department heads in the room had been told to expect changes. 2 had been informed that their positions were under review. A new training initiative was announced for the first quarter of the following year. And then near the end of the meeting, Julian Cross asked the head of HR to bring Camille Harper into the room. She walked in without knowing what she was walking into. She had spent the last 3 hours in her office trying to remember every word that had been said the night before. She had told herself that he could not possibly be the same man. The man last night had been a nobody. The man at the front of the ballroom was wearing a suit that cost more than her car. They could not be the same. But they were. Julian stood at the head of the long conference table. 20 executives sat along it. 2 assistants stood by the wall. Olivia was not in the room, but she had been told by Grace in a whisper at the desk what was happening upstairs. "Camille," Julian said. His voice was quiet. "Yesterday evening at approximately 6 o'clock, you ordered security to remove me from the Belmont room because you did not like the way I was dressed. Do you remember saying that?" She opened her mouth. "Yes or no will do." "Yes," she said. The word was almost inaudible. "Do you know how many guests were in the dining room who saw what you did?" 11. I counted them." He let the number sit in the room. "I want you to understand something. I am not removing you from this company today. I could. The board would agree with me before lunch. But my father built this hotel on the idea that people deserve a second chance, even people who do not extend one to others. So I am giving you one." He looked down at the folder in front of him. "Effective immediately, you are reassigned. You will report to the back-of-house logistics team in the basement. You will not manage staff. You will not interact with guests. You will track linen inventory and laundry deliveries. Your salary will be adjusted accordingly. If you accept this position, you may keep your employment with Lancaster Holdings. If you do not, HR will process your separation this afternoon." The room was very quiet. "Do you accept?" Camille's hands were trembling so badly she had clasped them together to hide it. She looked at Julian. She looked at the head of HR. She looked at the long, indifferent line of executives along the table. She thought of her apartment in Streeterville, her car, her mother in Indianapolis, who had told everyone in her church that her daughter ran the finest restaurant in Chicago. "I accept," she said. "Good." Julian closed the folder. "You will start tomorrow." When she walked out of the ballroom, no one looked at her. She made it as far as the women's restroom on the 2nd floor before her knees gave out. She sat on the cold tile inside one of the stalls and stared at the back of the door. And somewhere underneath the humiliation, underneath the disbelief, a small hot thing was already beginning to grow. It was not yet a plan. It was only a feeling. But it had a shape, and the shape had a name. And the name wasn't Julian's, it was Olivia Bennett's. The first time Julian Cross spoke to Olivia Bennett directly, she did not see him coming. It was the morning after the executive review, and she was at the front desk processing a late checkout for a guest who had complained about the temperature of the shower. She felt someone stop on the other side of the counter and looked up to find him standing there in the same charcoal suit, holding a paper cup of coffee in one hand. "You were on shift the night I came in," he said. It was not a question. Olivia's mouth went dry. She straightened her shoulders and met his eyes. "Yes, sir. I was. You said something to Camille after I left, about me being a guest. How do you know that?" "I asked Marcus." She nodded slowly. She had not expected the security officer to remember, much less repeat it. "I should have said it sooner. I should have said something the first time I saw her do it." "There was a first time. 2 of them, sir. That I saw. Before you." He took a long sip of his coffee. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man who had already known the answer and was only confirming the math. "Come up to the executive office at 3 this afternoon. Bring nothing. Just be on time." He walked away before she could ask what for. She stood at the desk with her hand on the keyboard, and the rest of the morning passed in a kind of slow blur of routine motions, until Grace Whitfield, the front desk manager, leaned over the partition and whispered, "Whatever you said to him, kid, you said the right thing. At 3 o'clock, Olivia rode the elevator up to the executive floor for the first time in her 3 months at the hotel. The carpet up there was thicker. The lights were softer. Julian was waiting for her in a small conference room with the head of human resources, a woman named Patricia Hale, who had a folder open in front of her. "I'd like you to join our management training track," Julian said without preamble. 12 months rotating through every department. At the end of it, if you do the work, you walk out qualified to run a property of your own. You'd report to Patricia for the curriculum and to me for the operational pieces. Olivia looked at him. She looked at Patricia. She looked back at him. "Sir, I've been here 3 months. I know. There are people on staff who have been here 10 years and haven't been offered this. I know that too." She felt her face flush. "Why me?" "Because you saw something wrong, and you said so out loud," Julian said. "That's a harder thing to find than experience. Experience I can teach. The other thing I can't." She accepted. She did not know how to say no to a thing like that, even if she had wanted to, and she did not want to. By the end of the week, she had moved out of the front desk rotation and into a small office on the 4th floor, where she began shadowing department heads in the mornings and reading operational reports in the afternoons. By the end of the month, she had a nameplate on her door, a corporate email address, and a quiet, growing awareness that something in the building did not like her being there. Camille Harper had reported to the basement on the morning Julian had said she would. The logistics office was a windowless room behind the laundry, with a metal desk, a folding chair, and a clipboard hanging from a nail. She wore the same black dress she had worn for years on the restaurant floor, because nobody had given her a different uniform yet, and the contrast between the dress and the room was not lost on her. She tracked sheets. She counted towels. She signed for deliveries from a man who chewed tobacco and did not know her name. On her second morning in the basement, Camille was scheduled to turn in her manager-tier access badge to HR. She walked up to the 3rd floor at 7 in the morning, half an hour before Patricia Hale's office opened, and slid the badge into the drop box outside the door. What she did not put in the drop box was the spare badge she had requested from facilities 18 months earlier after losing the original at a wine event, and which had never been deactivated in the system because she had never reported the original as found. The duplicate was in her purse. Nobody at the hotel knew it existed. She did not complain. She did not raise her voice. She arrived early and left late and answered every email with a single sentence and a period at the end of it. And to anyone who saw her in the hallway, she looked like a woman who had accepted her punishment. She had not. The thing that had begun to grow in her in the 2nd floor restroom that first day had only grown larger in the weeks since, and the shape of it had sharpened. She did not blame Julian. Julian had power, and power had done what power did. She blamed the girl from the front desk who had not even been there a full season, who had said one sentence in a hallway and ridden it all the way to the 4th floor. Camille had watched from the corner of the basement stairwell as Olivia walked past in a navy blazer with a name badge clipped to it that no longer said front desk. She had watched, and she had thought about all the years she herself had spent on her feet, learning every wine on the list, every regular guest's seating preference, every difficult vendor's first name. And she had thought very quietly, that should be me. By early November, Lancaster Holdings was 2 weeks out from one of the largest contract signings in its history. A technology company out of Seattle, Aldrin Vance Industries, was preparing to move its National Executive Retreat program to the Lancaster portfolio, a multi-year agreement worth $41 million over 6 years. The signing dinner was scheduled for the Belmont Room on a Thursday evening, and Julian had assigned Olivia to oversee it. She did not feel ready. She said so twice to Julian directly, and both times he had given her the same answer. "You're not supposed to feel ready. You're supposed to do it anyway." For 2 weeks, she lived inside the planning binder. She memorized the seating chart. She rewrote the timing of the courses 3 times with the executive chef, a stern man named Thomas Reeves, who had been with the hotel for 19 years and who had decided somewhere in the second meeting that he liked her. She approved the linens, the floral arrangements, the wine pairings, the gift bags. She walked to the dining room at midnight the night before, alone with a notepad, checking the spacing of the chairs. The dinner began at 7. The first hour went smoothly. The Aldrin Vance executives arrived in good spirits. Their chief executive, a silver-haired man named Howard Brennan, was seated at the head of the table beside Julian. The amuse-bouche was served. The first wine was poured. Olivia stood at the back of the room near the service entrance, watching her hands folded in front of her, her heart finally beginning to slow down. The entrees came out at 8:15. The first plate hit the table in front of Howard Brennan. He looked down at it, lifted his fork, and froze. Then he set the fork back down very deliberately and looked up at the captain of the floor. "What is this?" The captain leaned in. "The duck breast, sir, as you requested. I requested the halibut, specifically, in writing, 3 weeks ago." His voice was not loud, but the table around him had gone quiet. "I am allergic to duck. It's on my dietary form." The captain went pale. He looked at the printed ticket in his hand. The ticket said, "Duck." He looked across the room toward Olivia. Olivia was already walking. By the time she reached the table, 4 other guests had discovered similar problems. A vegetarian had been served filet mignon. A guest who had specifically requested no dairy had a plate of risotto in front of her. The chief financial officer of Aldrin Vance, a woman named Diane Marsh, was staring at her plate with an expression that suggested she had not been spoken to this carelessly in 20 years. Howard Brennan was already reaching for his phone. "Mr. Brennan," Olivia said. Her voice was steady. She did not know how. "I owe you an apology, and I owe you a real one in a minute. But first, I'm going to make this right. I need 90 seconds. "You have 60, he said. She went into the kitchen and found Thomas Reeves standing over a printed run sheet, with both hands flat on the counter, white-faced. "The tickets are wrong, Olivia. Every VIP ticket is wrong. The dietary list I have in my hand is not the list I approved on Tuesday. Plate the halibut for Brennan, the cauliflower steak for Marsh. Pull the off-menu vegetarian course we built for the deputy. Now. Olivia the prep. I know what's in the walk-in. Plate it." She walked back out onto the floor. She stopped at Howard Brennan's chair and crouched slightly so she was speaking at his level instead of over his head, the way she had been taught in her second week of training by a banquet captain in St. Louis on a phone call. "Sir, the correct courses are coming out in less than 2 minutes. The mistake was ours. I will give you a written explanation of what happened by tomorrow morning, signed by me, and you will have it before you board your flight home. Tonight what I'm asking is that you let us finish your meal." Brennan looked at her for a long second. 2 minutes, he said. The corrected plates came out in less than that. The dinner resumed. The signing did not happen that night because Brennan made it very clear that no one at Aldrin Vance was going to put a signature on anything until they had a full explanation of how a confidential dietary list had been corrupted inside the Lancaster system. But the dinner did not collapse either. By the time the executives left, Brennan had shaken Olivia's hand and told her in a low voice near the coat check that she had handled herself well. Julian did not say a word to her that night. She was almost grateful for it. She did not know what she would have done if he had been kind to her or if he had been harsh. She drove home at 1 in the morning and did not sleep. The internal investigation began the next morning. The IT department pulled the audit logs on the dietary database. The chef pulled the printed tickets. The procurement team pulled the timestamps on every menu approval for the past month. The picture that began to assemble itself was not flattering to Olivia. The dietary list had been modified at 4:47 in the afternoon, 3 hours before service. The modification had been made from a workstation logged in under Olivia's credentials. The IP address of the workstation traced back to a terminal on the 4th floor, 2 doors down from Olivia's office. By the time Patricia Hale called Olivia into a meeting at noon, Olivia could see it in her face. Patricia did not want to believe it. But the data was the data. Olivia, can you account for where you were yesterday afternoon between 4:30 and 5? I was on the second floor with Thomas walking the room. Anyone with you? Thomas, the captain, 2 banquet servers. Were you on a computer at any point between 4 and 6? No, I was on the floor the whole time. There's a record showing your login was used at a 4th floor workstation at 4:47 yesterday. That's not possible. I'm telling you what the system shows. Olivia did not cry in the meeting. She cried in her car afterward in the parking garage on the 3rd level with both hands on the steering wheel. She did not understand how someone could be set up by a thing as faceless as a database. She did not in that moment even know to suspect Camille. She did not have the picture yet. The picture began to form a week later when other things started going wrong. A block of rooms for an inbound corporate client disappeared from the reservation system overnight, leaving 22 travelers with no place to sleep when they arrived from O'Hare at midnight. A linen order for the Belmont room was somehow rerouted to a competitor hotel 6 blocks away, and the discovery came at 4 in the afternoon on a Saturday, with a wedding banquet starting at 6. The hotel's social media accounts received a flurry of bad reviews within the same 24-hour period, each from accounts that had been created in the last month. Every incident touched something Olivia was responsible for. None of them touched anything Camille had any visible connection to. The pressure on Olivia mounted in a way she had not been trained for. The department heads who had welcomed her in October began to keep their doors closed when she walked past in late November. Grace Whitfield, who had been kind, started avoiding her in the hallway. Patricia Hale called her in for a second meeting and told her gently, and without making it a threat, that if one more incident occurred under her supervision, the company would have to consider whether the management track had been a mistake. Julian asked her into his office on a gray Tuesday afternoon. She thought she was about to be removed. "Sit down," he said. He did not sound angry. He sounded tired. "I'm not going to ask you if you did any of these things. I already know the answer. I want to ask you who you think did." "I don't know, sir." "Take a guess." She thought about it for a long time. She thought about the basement. She thought about the woman in the black dress signing for laundry deliveries. She thought about the way Camille had looked at her the day Olivia had walked past the basement stairwell in her new blazer. "Camille Harper," she said. Julian nodded slowly. "Why her?" "Because she's the only person in this building who would have a reason to want me to fail. And because she has the credentials to know how every one of these systems works. She managed events here for 6 years. She knows the dietary database better than I do." "Can you prove it?" "No, sir." "Then we have a problem." He stood up and walked to the window. The view from his office looked out over the river, and the November light was the color of pewter. He spoke without turning around. "I built this management track because I wanted to bet on someone like you. If I pull you off it now, every person in this company will learn the wrong lesson. They'll learn that the first time something goes wrong, ownership flinches. But if I keep you on it, and the incidents continue, the company loses real money, and I have a board that will start asking questions I don't want to answer yet. I'm telling you this so you understand the position I'm in. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm asking you to know what's at stake." Olivia looked at his back. She had not until that conversation fully understood that Julian was not invincible inside his own company. She had assumed that owning a thing meant you could do whatever you wanted with it. She was learning that he had constraints too, and that part of his constraint was her. "I'll find it," she said. He turned around. "Whatever it is, whatever she's doing, I'll find it. I just need you to give me 1 more week." "You have until Friday." She left his office and went straight to the IT director, a quiet man named Wesley Karp, who had worked at the hotel for 11 years and who had, she suspected, also been a fan of the way she had handled the Brennan dinner. She asked him a question she had not known to ask before. "Wesley, When someone logs into a workstation here, does the system record where they badged in from? Door swipes are on a separate system. Yes. Can you pull mine for the day of the Brennan dinner? He pulled them. The records showed her badge entering the second-floor service corridor at 3:58 that afternoon, and not exiting until 6:20. She had been nowhere near the fourth floor between 4 and 6. The login at 4:47 had been impossible for her to have made. Wesley, she said, who has after-hours access to the fourth floor that wouldn't show up on a guest-facing report. He looked at the screen. He scrolled. Anyone with a manager tier badge from the last 3 years? That's about 40 people. Can you pull who actually badged into the fourth floor on the afternoon of the Brennan dinner? He typed. He waited. The list came up. 2 names appeared between 4 and 5 in the afternoon. One was a maintenance technician who had been replacing a thermostat in the executive break room. The other was a name that should not, by any current organizational chart, have been able to badge into the fourth floor at all. Camille Harper. Olivia stared at the screen. Wesley stared at it too. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Olivia took out her phone and texted Julian 3 words. I have it. The meeting was called for 9 the next morning in the executive boardroom on the 4th floor. Patricia Hale was there. Wesley Karp was there with his laptop open and the badge records pulled up on the screen at the head of the table. Daniel Pierce had flown in from Atlanta on the red-eye. Julian sat at the far end of the table with both hands flat against the wood, and Olivia stood near the door because she had asked very specifically to not sit down. Camille was summoned at 9:15. She came up from the basement in the same black dress, and the only person who would have noticed that her hand trembled on the door handle as she walked in was Olivia, who had spent the last 6 weeks watching her without seeming to. Camille saw the laptop on the table. She saw Wesley. She saw the way Patricia would not meet her eyes. She understood before anyone had said a word what kind of room she had walked into. Sit down, Camille, Julian said. She did. Wesley, take her through it. Wesley turned the laptop around. He spoke without flourish the way an accountant reads a tax return. He showed her the badge records for the afternoon of the Brennan dinner. He showed her the same records for the night the room block had disappeared, and the afternoon the linen order had been rerouted. Every incident had a 4th floor badge swipe attached to it that did not belong on the 4th floor. Every swipe had a name on it. The name was hers. This isn't possible, Camille said. The voice was very small. I turned in my badge. You turned in a badge, Wesley said quietly. You did not turn in the duplicate. Facilities issued you a second card 18 months ago after you reported the first one lost. The first one was never deactivated because you never reported it found. Both cards have been active in our system this entire time. The one in our records went into Patricia's Dropbox. The other one made these swipes. Camille looked at her hands. She did not look at Julian. She did not look at Olivia. She had been preparing for the duration of the elevator ride up from the basement, some version of the speech she had rehearsed in her bathroom mirror that morning, a careful, measured denial built around the assumption that nothing could be proven. She had not anticipated that the proof would already be on a screen in front of 3 vice presidents before she had even sat down. Camille, Julian said. His voice was not cruel. I'm going to ask you one time. Did you do this? She didn't answer. Her face changed instead. It changed slowly the way a building changes when the lights inside it begin to go out one window at a time. Her jaw set. Her eyes filled. She looked up finally, but she did not look at Julian. She looked at Olivia, who was still standing by the door. You weren't supposed to last a month, she said. Olivia did not move. 3 months at the front desk. 3. And 1 sentence in a hallway, and you were on the 4th floor with a nameplate on your door. Do you know how long I waited for that office? Do you know how many nights I closed this restaurant alone? Do you know what I gave up to be here? Camille, Patricia said. Her voice was very soft. Don't. But Camille was already inside it now, and the thing she had been holding closed for 6 weeks had cracked, and what came out wasn't a defense. I grew up in a town outside Indianapolis, where my mother worked the front desk of a Motel 6 for 22 years. 22 years, and she never once got to wear a name badge that wasn't pinned to a polyester vest. I clawed my way out of that town. I waited tables in 3 cities. I learned every wine on every list I was ever handed. I worked Thanksgiving for 9 years in a row. Her voice broke and recovered. And you walked in here in October with a hospitality degree from a school I had never heard of. And within 90 days, you had everything I had spent 15 years building. And he gave it to you because you said one sentence. She finally looked at Julian. You don't see it, she said. You think you fixed something that night. You didn't. You just picked a new favorite, and you handed her my life. The room was very quiet. Daniel Pierce, who had spent 30 years in corporate hospitality and who had heard a great many speeches in a great many rooms, looked down at his folder and didn't look up. Patricia held her pen above the page without writing. Julian let the silence carry for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had not changed. It was the same voice he had used at the front of the ballroom 6 weeks earlier. The same voice he had used in the lobby. The same voice he had used the night he had said, "Tomorrow, you'll know exactly who I am. Camille, I am sorry that you grew up the way you did. I mean that. My father grew up scrubbing floors in a hotel in St. Louis, and I have spent my entire adult life trying to honor the way he treated the people who scrubbed floors for him. But what you did was not a response to unfairness. What you did was sabotage to a colleague who never harmed you. And what you did the night I walked into this hotel was not a misunderstanding about a dress code. It was a decision about who deserves to be treated like a human being and who doesn't, and you made the same decision twice before you made it about me." He stood up. "You are terminated effective immediately. You will be escorted to the basement to retrieve any personal items. You will not return to the building after today. HR will process your separation and your final pay this afternoon, and the company will not pursue civil action provided you sign a non-disclosure on the way out. That is more grace than this situation entitles you to. I am extending it because I do not want to be the kind of man who answers cruelty with cruelty, but it is the last grace you will receive from me." Camille did not argue. There was nothing left in her to argue with. She nodded once almost to herself and stood. She walked to the door without looking at Olivia, and she walked out of the boardroom without looking back. The Aldrin Vance contract was the next thing on the table, and it was not in good shape. Howard Brennan had returned to Seattle without signing, and his office had gone quiet for the better part of 2 weeks. The board of Lancaster Holdings had begun to ask questions. Daniel Pierce had been on the phone with Brennan's chief of staff twice without producing a meeting. The number on the line was $41 million over 6 years, and the longer it sat unsigned, the more it began to look, from the outside, like a deal that had already died. Julian called Olivia into his office on the Thursday after Camille's termination. "I want you to go to Seattle," he said. "Tomorrow. I want you to sit across the table from Howard Brennan, and I want you to close this contract." "Sir, I'm not—" "You are. He's a chief executive of a company worth $11 billion. I've been in management for 3 months. He shook your hand at the coat check. He told you that you handled yourself well. He has not said that about a single other person who works for me. You are the person in this building who has the highest probability of getting his signature on that document, and the contract is dying. So yes, you are." She took the early flight out of O'Hare the next morning. She had not slept. She had read the contract on the plane, and had read it again in the back of the car from SeaTac. She had written notes in the margins until the margins had run out. By the time she walked into the Aldrin Vance headquarters at 11 in the morning Pacific time, she had stopped feeling afraid and had begun to feel something cleaner which was prepared. Howard Brennan met her in a conference room on the 34th floor. Diane Marsh, the chief financial officer, was with him. So was a lawyer named Edward Whitlock. They were polite. They were not warm. "I appreciate you flying out," Brennan said. "But I'll be honest with you. We've already had 2 conversations with the Bellwether Group, and one of them was about this exact program. The Bellwether Group was the largest competitor Lancaster Holdings had in the corporate retreat market. Olivia knew their numbers because she had memorized them on the plane. "Mr. Brennan," she said. She did not sit down right away. She put her folder on the table and stood behind her chair. "I'm not going to pretend I don't know who Bellwether is. I'm going to tell you instead what happened in our building, because I owe you that. And then I'm going to tell you why what happened is the reason you should sign with us anyway." He raised his eyebrows. Diane Marsh set down her pen. Olivia walked them through it. She did not protect Camille. She did not protect herself. She told them about the basement reassignment, about the duplicate badge that had never been deactivated, about the dietary list, about the room block, about the linen order. She told them that the woman responsible had been terminated 3 days earlier, and that the access control failure that had allowed it had been corrected company-wide within 72 hours. She showed them the new protocol. Signed by Daniel Pierce, she did not flinch from any part of it. "The reason you should sign with us," she said, "is not that we have never had a failure. The reason is that when we had one, we did not hide it. I am 26 years old, and I have been in a management role for 3 months, and the chief executive of my company put me on a plane this morning to tell you the truth in a room. Bellwether will not do that. They will send you a senior vice president with a deck. You will get a deck, or you will get this. You decide which one is worth $41 million. Brennan looked at Diane Marsh. Diane Marsh looked at the lawyer. The lawyer did not say anything because lawyers in those rooms were not paid to say things at moments like that. "Sit down," Brennan said. She sat. The contract was signed at 4:18 Pacific time. Olivia was on a red-eye back to Chicago that night, and she slept the entire flight because the body, when it finally lets go all at once. The week between the signing and Christmas was the strangest week of Olivia's life. The hotel had not changed exactly, but something inside, the way people moved through it had. Department heads who had stopped meeting her eyes were nodding at her again in the elevator. Grace Whitfield brought her a coffee from the lobby cafe without being asked. A bellman she did not know smiled at her in the hallway and called her by her name. Julian called a company-wide town hall on the Friday before the holiday. Every employee who could be spared from their station was in the grand ballroom. The kitchen had sent up a skeleton crew. The basement logistics team had come up in their work clothes, and they stood near the back because they had been told by a memo from Patricia Hale that they were welcome. Julian stood at the front of the room without notes. "I have been the owner of this company for 11 years, he said. "And for 11 years, I ran it from an office in Atlanta because I trusted the people in this building to live up to the name on the door. I want to apologize to you for that. Not for trusting you, for being too far away to know which of you needed help and which of you needed to be stopped, and which of you, the largest group by far, were already doing the work the right way and not being seen for it." He looked around the room slowly. "I'm announcing today, effective the 1st of January, a full revision of the service standards at every Lancaster property. The standard is going to be simple. Every guest who walks through our doors is to be greeted as if they are the person who built this building. Not because they might be rich, not because they might be famous, because they are a guest. The dress code in the Belmont room will remain. It will be enforced with a jacket from the coat check free of charge, the way it was in 1986 when my father wrote the original policy. No one will be turned away from a Lancaster restaurant because of what they are wearing. Anyone who turns someone away on that basis will be terminated the same day. There will be no second meetings about it." The room was very quiet. "The second change is that we are creating a new internal review process reporting directly to my office for any complaint a guest makes about how they were treated. The current process buries those complaints in the same inbox as broken showers and slow check-ins. That is going to stop. A guest who is treated badly by a Lancaster employee will get an answer from me in writing within 72 hours. He looked toward the back of the room where the basement crew was standing. And the third change is that the management training track, which has produced exactly one graduate in the last quarter, is going to be open to internal applications from every department. Front desk, housekeeping, logistics, engineering. If you want a seat at the table in this building, you are going to be able to apply for it. The first review will happen in March. There was a pause, and then someone in the back of the room began to clap. It was a single pair of hands at first, and then another, and then the room. Julian found Olivia on the rooftop that night. It was snowing. The hotel had a small private terrace on the 22nd floor, accessible only from a service stairwell, where the kitchen kept its herb planters in the warmer months. The planters were under canvas now. The skyline of Chicago was 1,000 small lights stretched out to the east, and the lake beyond them was a black, invisible thing. She had gone up there to be alone for 10 minutes, and he had followed her because Grace had told him where she had gone. "You did a good thing today," she said when he came through the door. "I did a thing I should have done 4 years ago." She did not argue with him. The snow was falling slowly in big, slow flakes that did not seem to be in a hurry to reach the ground. She tucked her hands into the sleeves of her coat. "Can I ask you something, sir?" "You can stop calling me sir." "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "That first night, when you said tomorrow, you'll know exactly who I am. Did you already know what you were going to do?" He looked out at the city for a long time before he answered. "No," he said. "I knew I was going to do something. I didn't know what." I went back to my room, and I sat on the bed, and I thought about my father. He used to tell me that people think money is what makes a person valuable. He said it never was. He said the way we treat people who can't do anything for us, that's the only thing that ever told you who someone really was. I sat there and I thought about Camille, and I thought about how she had looked at me, and I realized I had been the one who hadn't been paying attention. I'd been 3 states away pretending the name on the building was enough. It wasn't. He turned to look at her. "You were the one who told me, Olivia. You did not know it. But you were." The snow kept falling. Below them, somewhere on Michigan Avenue, a car horn sounded once and then went silent. The Lancaster crown stood under them, lit from the base to the roofline, and for the first time in a long time, it was all the way through the hotel his father had meant for it to be. "People think money makes you who you are," Julian said quietly, almost to the city. "It doesn't. The way you treat the person who can do nothing for you, that's the only thing that ever does." Olivia did not say anything. She did not need to. They stood there together and watched the snow fall on Chicago, and somewhere far below them, in a city that did not yet know it, a person was walking into a hotel for the first time in their life, hoping to be treated like they belonged there. This time they would be.